Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
I want to get to the book, The First Date, in a minute, but I know you go through a process right around Christmas about deciding your future.
Yeah.
I wonder if, with Speaker Emeritus' decision to not seek re-election and the pressure you see building up within the Democratic Party for calls for a younger generation of leadership, you think more profoundly than ever before about not seeking re-election and calling it quits?
No, I stepped out of leadership, and where I stand now is between me and the voters in the 6th Congressional District, and of course my family. And we're going to have the talk, as we always have during the Christmas holidays. We always get together the weekend before Christmas and stay together until New Year's Day, and we reflect on the year, project into the next year, and we'll do that this year as well.
So nothing's different for you in that process?
Absolutely not.
And calls for a new generation and older Democrats stepping aside don't feel heavy on your shoulder?
No, no heavier than it was that I didn't get here until I was 52 years old because of the laws that existed in South Carolina at the time. And I tell people all the time, let's make sure we don't get those laws back again and it's looming over.
Do you think come January 2026 we're going to have another government shutdown?
I don't think so.
You don't? Okay.
No, no. The powers that be see that you have to be very careful how you flex those powers. And people write that the Democrats caved. That's not what Democrats did. Democrats put before the American people exactly what the issues are. And when they saw those issues explained to them, they reacted in Virginia and New Jersey, not in Mississippi and Georgia, in such a way that I'm sure they'll stay away from forcing others.
Do you think Obamacare expanded tax credits are going to be expanded before the end of this year, or do you think people are going to be facing higher insurance premiums starting in 2026?
I don't know if it'll be before, but I'm sure they'll be back. I feel sure.
Republicans are going to give ground on that, is what you're telling me.
Oh, I think so. I think so, because the American people want it.
Doesn't sound like it.
Well, you know, they make a lot of noise, but that's not what this is about. This is about what I call that quiet voter that's listening, watching, reading, and they are going to react to their own selfish benefits.
Excellent. The first 8, I want to say their names.
Please.
Harvey Kane, Robert Brown Elliott, Robert Carlos DeLarge, Alonzo Jacob Renzier, Thomas Ezekiel Miller, Joseph Hayne Rainey, Robert Smalls, George Washington Murray.
Yeah.
Tell me in toto what they represent.
Well, Rainey
we'll get to their individual stories, but
they're way down on your list. But Joseph Rainey was the very first. He's the first African American to be elected to Congress ever. Now, a lot of people look at those senators from Mississippi who came before him, but they were not elected. Senators were appointed by the legislatures back in those days. So Joseph Rainey is very, very important to this process. Of the 8, only 3 were enslaved, and Rainey was one of them. His father bought his family's freedom. Robert Smalls, who I think was the most consequential of all of them, escaped from slavery.
We'll get to him, I guarantee you. And George Washington Murray, also enslaved.
Also enslaved, and he was the only one that was emancipated.
Harvey Kane, Robert Brown Elliott, Northerners.
Northerners, absolutely. Kane came from Ohio after having been born in West Virginia, then went up to New York to pastor and was sent to Charleston to rebuild Emmanuel AME Church. And Robert Brown Elliott was from Massachusetts, and he is kind of interesting because a lot of people studied him and couldn't figure out if he was really an American. He said he was from Massachusetts, so I guess they accepted his word for it.
And then Robert Carlos DeLarge, Alonzo Jacob Renzier, Thomas Ezekiel Miller, given a name back then that many young Americans don't have any familiarity with at all, and maybe are made uncomfortable by, mulattoes.
They were, except for one. Thomas E. Miller was not mulatto.
Okay.
He was white. He had been born white and out of wedlock, given up for adoption, and an African-American family adopted him. So he made the choice to get into this 8. But he lived his life out as an African-American. Eventually went to college, Lincoln University and HBCU in Pennsylvania, where Thurgood Marshall went to school. And then he went back to South Carolina and went to the University of South Carolina Law School and lived in South Carolina.
And the point of the first 8 is they are part of a tapestry of a certain time in American history.
Right.
That you are, with your election as the first Democrat in the House from South Carolina, are linked to, but separated by 95 years?
95 years between number 8 and number 9. And so much of this book is not just about informing people as to who these 8 people were, but to kind of educate people as to why there's 95 years between number 8 and number 9, and why we ought to be very careful as to what is going on today, because it seems to be tracking what happened back in 1876 when we had a presidential election that was thrown into the House of Representatives. We saw taking place here after 2020 much of what took place in 1876.
I'm going to give my audience a quick history of 1876 because they may not remember. Ohio Republican Governor Rutherford B. Hayes runs against New York Governor Samuel Tilden. Tilden gets 50.9% of the popular vote. Hayes gets 47.9% of the popular vote. Tilden has 184 electoral votes, one shy of the 185 necessary. Hayes has 165, but 20 are in dispute. 4 in Florida, 8 in Louisiana, 7 in South Carolina, 1 in Oregon.
Right.
A commission is created, 15 members. It votes 8-7 to give all 20 to Rutherford B. Hayes. And the backdrop for that is his willingness to pull federal troops out of the last 2 Confederate states in which they were deployed under Reconstruction, Louisiana and South Carolina, essentially ending Reconstruction.
Absolutely.
That's a big tour. That's a big tale in American history.
And I think people, this to me is what's so important about this book. Number one, 3 big things happened during this period. All 3 of them were decided by 1 vote. Now, before we got to this, you had the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, who was trying to undo everything Lincoln did. And when the House impeached him, the Senate failed to convict him by 1 vote. Then you get this committee to decide who will get these 20 votes. They voted 8-7 to give the votes to Hayes. And then that resulted in Hayes becoming president of the United States, not just bringing an end to Reconstruction, but when he pulled all the troops out, it began Jim Crow by 1 vote.
Right. Now, there are those, and I've read books about this, Congressman Clyburn, that argue even before this election and this decision to pull the troops out of the remaining 2 states, Reconstruction and federal enforcement was waning because of the violence that cropped up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Reconstruction was ending sort of block by block, city by city because of white supremacist violence against it?
Exactly right.
But this marked the official end of it, and the federal government pulled out entirely.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the presidents, first of all, after Andrew Johnson, you had Ulysses Grant was not enforcing things that needed to be enforced. And that happened throughout this. You had the Supreme Court that began to interpret that 1866 Civil Rights Act that was passed by these gentlemen and others, of course. That was called into question because of the slaughterhouse cases. These things were narrowing the effects
of Reconstruction, and what it was trying to create and establish after the Civil War.
Right.
I want to ask you something. Why do you think we have not had in this country a feature-length film about Robert Smalls?
That's one
I
of
mean,
the mysteries.
come on.
Yeah. If there's
Tell my audience anything about Robert Smalls, because there's 2 or 3 movies there, but there's at least one.
Absolutely. And somebody told me that there's one in the making.
There ought to be.
I know of. I don't know of it. I called him the most consequential South Carolinian who ever lived. You can talk about John C. Calhoun. You can talk about Strom Thurmond. They were consequential, but not to the extent of Robert Smalls. Born enslaved, escaping in the most dramatic way that anyone could ever imagine, stealing the whole ship.
The planter.
The planter, bringing on his family and his friends, and they escaped, delivered that ship to the Union soldiers.
Because the Confederate naval officers of that vessel would go on shore overnight and amuse themselves, and they knew
Absolutely.
that. And he looked like the captain.
Looked like the captain. I mean, he flopped that hat on. Those centuries, there were 5 centuries that he had to pass. They thought he was the captain because one of his buddies told him, anytime you put that hat on, man, you look exactly like the captain.
And he had the demeanor,
Yep.
the courage,
Yep.
the presence
Did it all.
to act and speak and give signals like the captain.
Yes,
Exactly the way he did.
He did it. And
That's only part of the story.
less than 6 months after he escaped from slavery, he's sitting down here in Washington, D.C.
With whom?
With Abraham Lincoln.
Asking
the
for what?
president. Asking to allow African Americans to fight in that war. And up to that point, they were not allowed. Even Frederick Douglass was up here trying to convince Lincoln to do it. He couldn't do it. Robert Smalls did it. Convinced him. He was authorized to get 5,000 soldiers. It got up to 40,000 when he got back home. And here he is, the most celebrated person of all. People in New York wished that they wanted him to come and live in New York. He was a big celebrity. Pennsylvania, they wanted him in Philadelphia, but he stayed in South Carolina.
And for those in my audience who might say, well, there are a lot of soldiers in the Civil War, 40,000 African Americans, what difference would that have made?
Well, there got to be more than that.
Right.
His part was 40,000, but others started to come in because they had to have
That's
him.
the point.
They had to have him. And Abraham Lincoln is there in the book, the exact quote that he says, but for the freedmen, the Union would not have won that war. And so you got to look at Robert Smalls' role. But I'll tell you something else to demonstrate the compassion of the man. When the war was over, he went back to his hometown of Beaufort. His former owner had fallen into poverty, had lost his house. Smalls bought that house. And when his former owner died, he brought her, the widow, into his home and kept her until she died in 1904.
That is a level of compassion I'm not sure everyone could bring themselves to.
Yeah, but Smalls was just an incredible person, and anybody wishes to study what it's like to forgive if you don't forget, because he never forgot. Even Smalls was one of 2 people two African Americans anyway, that in both Constitutional Convention, the 1868 Constitutional Convention that gave him all of his freedoms, he also was at the 1895 convention that took all of them away. But he refused to sign the convention report. And they told him, if you don't sign the report, we're not going to pay your expenses to get back home. And he says, even if I have to walk, I will not sign this report. And he didn't. I don't know how he got back home, but he did get back.
We need the movie to explain that.
Yeah, you're right. And can you imagine a movie with that planter going through the Charleston Harbor, past Fort Sumter? Oh, man, that would be a great movie.
Is it an oversimplification, Congressman Clyburn, and please tell me if it is, that the reason there's 95 years between these 8 and you is Jim Crow?
Oh, no, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Remember, in 1896, 1 year before George Washington Murray left, we had something called Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yeah.
That the Supreme Court decision that says separate but equal is constitutional, and that's what that solidified Jim Crow.
It was already there, but it made it absolutely solid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you get to Congress in 1992?
Because after the 1954 Supreme Court decision, which opened the floodgates, a 9-0 Supreme Court decision, overturning Plessy versus Ferguson, and it started out a movement from the courts that eventually got into the legislature and Congress, passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and then the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And my longtime friend, who I met when we were 19-year-old college students, John Lewis, he and others, marching across that bridge. At the time, they marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in March of 1965. Only 3% of African Americans in Alabama were registered to vote. That is what started it. And so when the department, the executive department, and the Justice Department and the Department of Education was involved in a little bit, but the Justice Department told the southern states that when you do your next redistricting, you must redistrict in such a way that African Americans will have an opportunity to elect people of their choice. And that first election under that was the 1992 election. That's when I got elected, and that is what they're attempting to undo now, much like they did after 1876.
So walk me through what you mean by that, trying to undo that, and the comparisons you see between 1876 and what happened 2021, right after the 2020 election.
The comparisons are right after the 2020 elections. You may recall they were trying to set up separate electors.
Alternate slate of electors.
Alternate slate of electors. They were doing it up in Michigan, banging on the door, trying to get in there. We had people who eventually were convicted and went to jail for doing that. They did it in 3 states before, because that's what happened in those 3 states. They had those
1876.
Alternate set of electors. They were trying to do the same thing in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia. The phone call, find me 11,600 votes, whatever it was. So all of that, when I saw so-called Project 2025, I looked back at what Martin Gary did, the general who wrote that edict that everybody called the Edgefield Plan. Project 2025 is just a current edition of what was written in the Edgefield Plan by Martin Gary. And so what is going on now, taking Jackie Robinson out of references in the military, in the Pentagon, getting rid of the contributions of the Tuskegee Airmen, eliminating the Department of Education, and the Supreme Court now redefining the 1965 Voting Rights Act so as to get rid of Section 4.
That's a pending matter before the court?
Absolutely. I mean, so it's exactly what's going on now. Now, what happened in Texas recently, when the court says what you did went beyond.
Redistricting.
On redistricting. Now, if this holds, I think it will successfully arrest that. But if the United States Supreme Court steps in and overturn what that federal judge has done, who was a Trump appointee, who sees this as being bad for the country and bad for the law, the Constitution. If the Supreme Court reversed that, we are back the way we were doing Jim Crow.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No hesitation in saying
No hesitation on my part. The history is clear. And I always say, one should not argue with history. You either fight it or accept it, but don't ever argue that it's not accurate. History is always accurate.
When you think about your legacy in Congress, how do you want it to be thought of?
Well, I've asked my daughters, I have 3 of them, to put on my tombstone. He did his best to make America's greatnesses accessible and affordable for all. Because I do believe that this is a great country. What we all got to figure out is how to make all the greatnesses that exist in this country accessible and affordable for all. And that's what I've tried to do. Even when I authored that broadband bill that became a part of the Inflation Reduction, of the infrastructure bill, when I authored that, I call it the Accessible, Affordable Broadband for All. And that's what I've tried to do. Housing, education, healthcare, energy, whatever it is, let's make sure that it is accessible and affordable for all.
Isn't it also important, Congressman Clyburn, for those efforts to be felt and experienced by the American public? Because the Biden administration told reporters like me over and over again it was the most progressive administration since FDR, more than even LBJ. And did so many things during COVID and after COVID to address these issues across the board: rent, college debt. And yet, when push came to shove in 2024, not only did the Democratic nominee lose, but it was evident across the country, Democratic voters were not motivated. They pulled back. They just sat on the sidelines.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Well, it's easy to explain when you look at the fact what really is impactful when it comes to people. And I think that's what you see going on now. If you can get the media forces to buy in to what you're doing, which is exactly what happened. I had more people telling me that they were voting for Trump because he takes charge. Well, people never believe in this stuff. Never mind that he wants to overturn everything that is doing.
You would be the first person, Congressman Clyburn, to sit here and say the media bought into Trump and helped him get elected.
A lot of them did.
I don't think he would necessarily agree with that, but go ahead.
A lot of them did, and still buying into him. I mean, why would the owner of the Washington Post overturn the endorsement that his people made of Kamala Harris?
Jeff Bezos.
Yes, he had it written.
He spiked it. He spiked it.
Yes. But what does that mean? He bought into something. And why are we having these other media places accepting these deals he's handing them? Why would they have these colleges, universities, these law firms? These are the places that we always look to for protection. And all of a sudden they're buying into some of this stuff. What is wrong with DEI?
What does that tell you?
It tells me that we have a lot of work to do, and we cannot allow, just because they buy in, doesn't mean we should. You know, when I was sitting in jail back in 1960, challenging what was going on in this country, I had no idea. People weren't agreeing with us. I mean, we had to confront it. And so just because you may not agree doesn't mean I got to accept it. You got to confront this stuff. And so I think we will. And I think that was happening up there. You saw the headlines coming out of New Jersey saying how tight that race was going to be. A 13-point victory ain't tight. Simply because people didn't buy in. They didn't buy in Virginia. Nobody was looking at Georgia and Mississippi.
So victory's there too.
The victory's there too. And so I think if we get reasonable, if not favorable, decisions from the Supreme Court, I think we'll arrest this cancer that's growing into our body politic.
Is it a dumb question for people like me to ask people like you who the leader of the Democratic Party is today?
Oh, it's not a dumb question, but I don't think there is a leader today any more than there was a leader among blacks before. Everybody said Martin Luther King Jr. was a leader, yes, but so was Roy Wilkins. So was Whitney Young. So was A. Philip Randolph. Everybody's got a role to play.
So in his own way was Malcolm X.
Yes, absolutely. Malcolm X is not just in his own way. The first book I ever picked up and did not put down until I got through it, it was Haley's book on Malcolm X. And it had a tremendous impact on me. The next one was A Team of Rivals. I couldn't put that book down either. It was all about Abraham Lincoln and what he did to bring warring forces together, bringing all of his opponents into the cabinet, sitting down and turning them in. And one of those guys was Saxon, who helped convince him to let Robert Smalls recruit those black soldiers.
And that brings us full circle. The book, The First Eight, A Personal History of the Pioneering Black Congressman Who Shaped a Nation. Jim Clyburn, Mr. Congressman, thank you.
Thank you. I said Saxon, but it was Sewell.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.